in March of 2016 was a meeting with the newly reinstated Minister of Finance, Mr. Gordon, and his deputy. The aspect of the wording of the press release was raised, and in substance I gave the same explanation as I have given in these proceedings, and as Mr. Gordon was the commissioner at the time of the formation of the establishment of the unit, I thought that he was entitled to an apology, and I tendered it.
So we're now talking, so it was in April 2015, there was the press release. You then said in March, I presume 2016, you reconsidered your view.
No, that's when I spoke to the Minister of Finance at a meeting which I had with him and the Deputy Minister. Yes. Subsequent to the press release, there had been reports or views expressed in the media that the finding that the establishment of the unit was unlawful was to be questioned, and we revisited it and discussed it, and it was concluded that we should not have made that statement. We should have restricted our comments to the members of the unit having engaged in unlawful activities.
So are you saying that was the collective view of the board at that stage?
Yes.
That the unit was not unlawfully established, that its activities were unlawful?
Yeah. We could not say that the unit was unlawfully established, and that was our view. We did not have the full information as to (2015) recorded that our decision at the time of the press release was in fact that members of
people get very cross when I ask the question, why is it unlawful? But I tell you, I had asked you because I would like to see if I'd missed something. And I obviously haven't missed something. I asked you, the advocate secret.
The unlawful unit wasn't an activity of your board. You didn't get involved in that.
we only received reports bearing on that.
So what would have been the reason or purpose for issuing this statement dealing with the alleged unlawfulness?
At our initial meeting in Cape Town, the Minister impressed upon us that as a matter of priority, we must give attention to, I think, what he referred to as the adverse publicity that SARS had received by reason of the reports in newspapers about what was referred to as a rogue unit. And then we took that further, and we thought we would issue a press release dealing with that aspect, which, as I've been at pains to point out, was wrongly worded, not in the sense that it wasn't intended to do it, to so word it, but in the sense that on proper thought processes about it, we should never have said that.
Judge, with respect, when one sees it's wrongly worded, it gives rise to the question, who drafted it?
My recollection is that a member of the board drafted it and submitted it for consideration by the other members of the board. If you want me to think back as to a name, I think it was Advocate Marstonbrook who made the initial draft, and it was circulated, and we discussed it, and it was just accepted.
Did SARS have any participation in the drafting?
At the meeting on the 28th of April 2015, we discussed the wording of the press release, and there were certain amendments were made, mainly about the publication of the Sikakani report.
And you say that the final one went to SARS of the draft?
An earlier one was sent to Mr. Moyani. I was told that the earlier draft, which did contain the comments about the unlawfulness of the establishment of the unit, was going to be placed before the minister, but I think that didn't happen because a proposed meeting did not take place.
Sorry, Judge, why was Mr. Moyani's participation in the drafting or approval a requirement?
No, it wasn't a requirement.
Why was it given to him?
As a matter of courtesy, I sent a copy of a proposed press release to Mr. Moyani and to the minister. At one stage, I had perhaps thought that Mr. Moyani should be part of the media release, but subsequently I advised him that it is advisory board event and not an event of SARS, and therefore he is willing to attend, but he cannot be part of the release.
Sorry, so Judge, just to confirm, this was the only press statement that the advisory board issued in its lifetime?
Yes.
Judge, I'm just sorry, I'm going back to something, because again you said the wording was unfortunate. Now, I understood you earlier to say that the wording is not unfortunate. We meant to say it is unlawful, and we got that from what Advocate Sikakani had said, so the wording was perfectly accurate.
Yes, the wording at that time was not incorrect in the sense of reflecting what we intended to say. It was fortunate that we intended to say that for the reasons which I have given. Not, perhaps the English is a bit tricky there, but it wasn't that the wording was mistaken. I did later on use the word erroneous, but that is in the sense that it should not have been made.
Yes, no, I understand, but you intended to tell the public that it was unlawful, but on reflection, you had no grounds.
Precisely.
I just want to, if you don't mind, I must ask one question. You said you apologized to Mr. Gordon. That was an occasion in which you happened to come together.
Yes.
Did you ever offer to apologize to him or anyone else without having come together?
No.
Just one final question. The consequences of your media release, among other statements, were quite devastating for SARS itself and for the country, but also for certain individuals. But there's also the future to look to. SARS disabled the capacity to enforce within the illicit economies. Just to pick up on something you say in your statement, you go further than saying it was acceptable and lawful to, in fact, establish a unit to deal with illicit economies, but that it's indeed prudent. So you would agree that going forward, it would be something that SARS would in fact be wise to re-establish?
Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge.
May I be excused, Mr. Commissioner?
Thank you very much, Judge.
Thank you.
Judge, our next witness is only scheduled for 11 o'clock, so perhaps we can take a recess until then.
Nonchalant.
What are you tweeting?
I'm just wondering if there's someone here who can turn the air conditioning so that it's a bit cooler. It's quite hot in here. I don't know if you find it.
Will you hang on to this?
Yes. Are you ready?
Judge, we call Mr. Hlengani Mathebula, who is the Chief Officer, Governance, International Relations, Strategy and Communications.
Morning, Mr. Mathebula.
Good morning, Judge, and your panel.
You affirm that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, will you say, I do?
I do.
Judge, Mr. Mathebula has submitted quite a lot to the Commission, a statement and a few files of documents to support his statement. This morning he gave me an updated copy of the statement I'd seen, and he kindly made copies for the panel. So I'm going to ask, I think I'm going to ask Advocate Hopton to hand them up. Here's another one. And I suggested to Mr. Mathebula that he take us through the statement, but that we will stop him when we need to get clarification or put other evidence to him. So with your permission, that's how we'll proceed with this witness.
Is that in order for you?
That's an order, Judge.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Judge and the panel, the first thing I would like to do is to apologize for my not making it on Wednesday. I had a family crisis that was quite serious. I did inform the Secretariat of the Commission that I had that challenge. So my apology if that did destabilize the Commission.
Thank you, but it's fine. We heard of your difficulties, and thank you.
Thanks so much. I would like to read my statement that I have prepared, and I know the copy you have does have few typos. I did indicate to Advocate Steinbeck that the copy I have is updated, and at the end I will give Advocate Steinbeck the copy that I have, or alternatively email to her a different one in the event there is a need for supplementary information to that.
And just to say to the Secretary, it's the updated one, the corrected one that we'll put on the website, not this one.
May I just say that's quite a long statement. Do you find it necessary to read through the whole statement, or rather just pick out the main points you wish to make?
Judge, I think for purposes of making sure that there is context, I would, if it pleases the judge, I would ask that I be allowed to read it. I will go through it quite fast, so it's really not going to take much time.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
I submit this statement accompanied by documentary evidence in order to assist the Commission of Inquiry, chaired by Judge R. Nugent. In submitting this statement, I'm mindful of the following considerations. That I'm a member of SARS EXCO since January 2016, that EXCO members play a supportive role to SARS Commissioner, who is both the accounting officer and accounting authority. And in this regard, EXCO assists the Commissioner in his role both as the first and fifth line of assurance in discharging our responsibilities to fulfill SARS mandate. That by virtue of my portfolio, I'm responsible for inter alia governance and reputation of SARS. This being a significant fiduciary responsibility calling for care and diligence, underpinned by hard work and SARS values. That as a citizen of this country, I must do what I can to support our maturing democracy. And that a collective EXCO response will be submitted by the acting commissioner to ensure that SARS EXCO places on record certain material facts in response to submissions known to SARS. Additionally, as I make my submission, it is further critical that two competing, albeit important, principles are balanced. These principles being the importance of disclosing and discussing facts that are pertinent to the Commission's terms of reference to ensure that the Commission has all the necessary information at its disposal to make its recommendation to the President on the one hand, and the need to rebuild and preserve the reputation of SARS as a key institution in our economy. SARS' reputation is critical in regaining the trust of taxpayers, and equally, the trust by other critical players like the rating agencies as a reflection of confidence in key institutions. In line with an effort to balance these principles, I register my willingness to testify in public as I now do, and in doing so, I will always be cognizant of the principles of preserving the reputation of SARS and various considerations I stated at the outset. I'm committed to be honest and transparent, although at pains to safeguard my safety and that of my family. There has been threats to both my life and my family's life during the later part of 2016. Resulting from these threats, I have been assigned security personnel, and this has been confirmed by crime intelligence and the South African Police Services. I further, as a senior official of SARS and a member of EXCO, have the common law fiduciary duty in the execution of my duties and duty of care and skill that make me feel duty-bound to testify at this commission. I now turn to the substance of my submission in the below paragraphs. I joined SARS in January 2016. In the current portfolio I occupy as Chief Officer, Governance, International Relations, Strategy and Communications. Part of my responsibilities included, but not limited to, advising on governance matters, best practice, enterprise risk management, ensuring SARS presence in the global and regional dialogues on tax, customs and excise, as well as revenue collection. I was also responsible for communication, stakeholder engagement, and integrated strategy development, monitoring and reporting. Shortly after joining, in and around March 2016, I was appointed to act in the role of a Chief Officer Enforcement. This I did until June 2017. The function in this portfolio included investigative audits, debt management, criminal investigations, compliance audit, excise and business support. My working relationship with the Commissioner, and in this regard I refer to Commissioner Moyane, started off the same way as most working relationships between an employer and employee will start. Cordial, full of enthusiasm, optimism, goodwill, and determination to work together harmoniously for the betterment of SARS and the country. However, in and around May 2016, that is hardly 4 months in the job, various developments ensued which soured the relationship between myself and the Commissioner. I summarize this below, some of the events and developments. I expressed a different opinion to the Commissioner and at times EXCO colleagues, which was seen as opposition and in some instances even betrayal. My fiduciary responsibilities being responsible for governance and reputation of the institution demanded that I continuously guard and caution against any acts that may affect the effective implementation of policies and affect the reputation of the institution. This served for a difficult working space. Resultantly, various investigations were instituted against me. My portfolio, which I alluded to in paragraph 5, above was broken down without any reason being advanced. This created uncertainties in the team and colleagues. The lack of regard for hierarchy and protocol by other executives who interfered in my portfolio with the commissioner's blessings and giving of direct instruction to my team by the commissioner resulted to some adverse consequences. My refusal to carry out instructions that I deemed to be against policies and my conscience was seen by the commissioner as being non-committal. As a result, I found myself having to constantly explain and pledge my commitment to serve the institution. Details of some of the key areas mentioned above are: so when I say I expressed a different opinion to the commissioner and at times EXCO colleagues, which was seen as opposition in some instances or betrayal, let me start with the issue around the SARS public image. It is common knowledge that the adverse media reports on SARS started in around 2014. After joining SARS in 2016, the commissioner expressed his unhappiness with the negative media reports on the institution. I was direct about my diagnosis of the challenges that SARS faced. This included the credibility of the person of the commissioner, which resulted in the credibility of question of the institution itself. This I told the commissioner personally. I committed to the commissioner that my team and I will do our best to profile SARS in order to boost taxpayer morality and confidence. We suggested to him that as a start, we will arrange a lunch-on with the editors and key journalists of key media houses. This was to allow SARS an opportunity to tell its own story. Engaging the media was critical so as to ensure that SARS rectifies the narratives as to ensure that tax morality was not affected by negative media reporting. The commissioner and EXCO agreed to this approach. In order to execute this, one of my staff members and myself met with various media houses in and around March 2017 and indicated to them that it was a facilitation of an engagement session with them, the SARS commissioner and the EXCO team. The media houses seemed amenable to engage the commissioner and the EXCO team. I then planned the luncheon for initial introduction, which was rescheduled a few times and subsequently cancelled at last minute by the commissioner in May 2017. Much as we did our best to manage the situation, this made a bad situation worse. I communicated the repercussions of the late cancellations, but no further engagements were agreed to by the commissioner. The negative media coverage of SARS continued, and difficult relationship between the institution and the media persisted despite the attempts to drive a different narrative. This obviously affected, amongst others, taxpayers. Outsourcing of debt collection.
May I just ask you to pause for a moment? If you could just elaborate on two phrases. You say that that in your diagnosis of the challenges that SARS faced at the time, these included the credibility question of the person of the commissioner. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Look, I think the issue here was that the reportage that we had been able to look at, in the main, will theme themselves around a questioning whether the commissioner was a competent person to run the institution. It will center around issues that had happened around the operating model, that key units had either been disbanded or had been made to report into different functions. So that in itself suggested that potentially the commissioner was not seen as a person that knew what he was doing. And in the main, the larger part of this media commentary revolved around the commissioner. So if you had not normalized the relationship between the commissioner, or at least took key editors and key journalists that reported on the institution to be able to understand or at least engage with the commissioner on a one-on-one in a closed session, not necessarily a secret session, but a closed session, which will allow them to contextualize the issues that they were dealing with. It will have been very difficult for any other person to then come up and say, listen, well, which is what we continuously did. We protested that we had the best qualified people who were running the institutions, because out of that it will be the commissioner doesn't know what he's doing, subsequently the EXCO doesn't know what it's doing, or the people that are in EXCO are not qualified, or there have been an absolute brain drain in the institution. And I think it was our responsibility to have to present, at least in my view, to present the key members of EXCO and the commissioner, let them meet with the editors or the media houses, let them interrogate the various members of EXCO, so that you don't then paint the entire EXCO with one brush. If you want to pick Hlengani and say Hlengani is not qualified for his job, do so. But then indicate why you think Hlengani is not qualified to do his job. And I think that's what I'm trying to paint in that instance.
And what reasons did the commissioner give you for cancelling these meetings with the media that you arranged?
Look, the first cancellation was understandable. There had been a new minister that had been appointed in the role, so he had to engage with the new minister. But the subsequent ones, there were no reasons that were advanced why we wouldn't be able to proceed. And that made it very difficult to then explain to editors. And I say this because you will then glean from what I've said that I had personally didn't delegate this responsibility. I had personally went and met with the editors. One of the media houses actually had the entire suite of their various newspaper editors in the room. And they were very, very keen. Now, I needed to then now pick up the phone and say, look, we can no longer do this. The commissioner is not available. Once it's okay, twice at a short notice, they start saying, no, maybe you are playing with us.
Okay, you can...
Questions on this aspect?
I really just would love to know, Mr. Mathebula, I'm struggling to get the sense that there would have been no reason at all expressed. I mean, you've indicated the one which related to the meeting with the minister. On these other occasions, there was nothing said about whether discomfort or I don't like these things. Would he have just simply said, I'm not available, and that's it, and there would be anything else said?
Look, I don't think the commissioner would have been able to, would have sustained a view that says, I'm uncomfortable because this was an EXCO decision in which he was present. And I didn't think in the EXCO meeting he had expressed that he was not willing to do so. He had said he is willing to do so. And EXCO had subsequently then approved that we engage in the manner that we had agreed. So, safe to say that, as I indicate, the reason that I was given was unavailability, and the one that I was given exact reasoning was the one that related to the minister. The other subsequent two was that the commissioner was no longer going to be available, and therefore we needed to cancel.
Mr. Mathebula, you've talked here about your one difficulty with the media was raising credibility questions of the person of the commissioner, which you then wanted to engage the media on.
Yes.
As I understand what you're saying now is that the only problem was that the media was getting it wrong and you just had to correct them and it would all be okay. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying the media was wrong. I'm saying that the commissioner had raised a concern around negative publicity around the institution, which was a concern for all of us. And for a person that has joined the institution and was tasked with media, I shared the view that we were in the newspapers almost every week for one story or the other. We had unending leakages of documentations that were official. And I thought that went to the core of what this institution is. This institution doesn't sell tomatoes. This institution is entrusted with information that people must be confident that when they supply that information, it is going to be safe. This institution is entrusted with being the heartbeat of the country. We collect 95% of government's revenue we ensure, Judge, and I come from a village that doesn't have a tar road, and I have a hope one day that through the tax we collect, my village will have a tar road and my people will have a better life from that perspective. So, and that's at a simplistic level, one can put it. So the criticality of this institution is very serious. And if you continue to barrage it to the extent that people will start having reasons why they cannot pay their taxes, then you have a problem.
No, indeed, I think that the importance of the institution is well known to us and of great concern to us. But my question was, your difficulties that you saw being published in the media, I get the impression from your evidence that you felt, well, it's just that the media has got it all wrong and all we need to do is explain it to them. But, you know, we don't have to fix anything at all. Is that correct or not?
No, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. I'm saying in the engagement with the media will then be able to ask difficult questions of the institution. And the leadership of the institution will then be able to say, listen, in this instance, we think you're getting it wrong. And in getting it wrong, this is how we will want, this is the information that we have at our disposal that can be able to disprove this. So let's take an example, Judge. Let's say the media says, no, you have disbanded the large business center. We think that taxpayers are not getting the best value out of the manner in which now the large business center is being serviced. And we really truly believe that the new model is much more better than the old one. Then we will have the responsibility to explain that to the media in the detail that will not include compromising taxpayer information. And to that extent, if the media continues because we have failed to explain to them, then at least they have been able to hear you. This thing of a newsletter going out or a press statement going out and waiting for calls to come in, that for me wasn't necessarily working. I happen to have been, one of my responsibilities had been to be a spokesperson for the South African Reserve Bank. And we had difficulties in that institution on a matter that would have been of serious credibility crisis for the institution. But we handled that matter quite well to the extent that we did not compromise how the institution was reported on.
You see, I'm still hearing from you saying, look, we just have to explain to the media. But what I'm not hearing is saying, well, maybe there are problems here that we should look at ourselves inside, rather than just tell the media that they explain to them why it's wrong. And that's what I'm not hearing a lot of, is it seems that your approach is, well, it was all okay, and it's just the media that was misreporting. I'm more interested in what was happening within the EXCO to examine what the media was saying and see if it was correct.
No, that's correct. So let me give you a different example, because I thought that as we go, you will then see that the issues around the specific things that were wrong, we then address that.
Okay, well then I'll leave that and we can come back to it. Just one other question, if I may. If you go to paragraph 7.5 of your submission. You have that?
Yes.
My refusal to carry out instructions that I deemed to be against policies and my conscience was seen by the Commission as being non-committal. What were these instructions that you considered to be against policy and against your conscience?
So I'll give you an example. and this is a live example of what I thought was an instruction that I couldn't execute with clear conscience. The commissioner one day called me into his office, and he gave me a list of names of people I would have had to either dismiss or suspend. And in the list, there were names of at least there was one person that I was familiar with, that I had interacted with, and I believed in this person's integrity. At first I was shocked, that I was given this list. I then asked for time to consider what the commissioner had requested of me to do. A day or so, I came back and asked the commissioner, where did he get the list? And because he had refused to give me the list. He had asked me that I should write down. And what would have been the major reasons why I should either suspend or investigate these people. And the reason I was given is because they were part and parcel of the rock unit. Now, I had read this stuff. I had no evidence, but I wasn't comfortable to investigate people without information, but simply being given the names. So I asked, where did you get this information? He said to me, Mr. Makoko had given him the list whilst they were together in New York. So I said, okay, but what are the real things that I needed to then do in this instance? No, you can investigate. So I said, look, Commissioner, I'm uncomfortable with this. I'm uncomfortable if in the course of my work as the acting head of enforcement, I discover information that would lead me to saying these people are involved in one or the other activity that requires investigation or that may lead into them being suspended. I will do so, but in this instance, I was not prepared to do so.
Are there any other cases in which instructions were given to you that you deemed to be against policies and your conscience?
Yes, the commissioner came to me with names of people that he wanted me to appoint in certain positions. The positions happened to have been it was a senior manager and an executive. I then said I thought it was difficult to do so without following process, and suggested that we would have to advertise the role and we would have to open them up and allow other people to apply. I didn't doubt that the people could potentially have the experience, but I had discomfort around the process that I could just appoint them. The commissioner was unhappy about that.
Can I ask you to...
The commissioner set out why he considered it appropriate that these individuals be appointed and be appointed in the manner that he had suggested.
Yeah, look, he did say that he was taking a great deal of pressure from Parliament, and I was with him in one of the parliamentary sessions where parliamentarians had asked us quite serious questions around our enforcement capabilities, and particularly around illicit and tobacco in particular. And he really wanted us to urgently establish a team that would look at the issue around the tobacco industry, because there was a lot of smuggling of tobacco going on, or all sorts of manner of things that were not necessarily legal that was going on in that space.
These individuals were part of your internal resources, or were they to be sourced from outside?
No, these individuals were part of the internal resources. So from that perspective, I did not have a reason to doubt that they did not have experience, because where they were, at any rate, they were doing the kind of work that he wanted me to appoint them to. But these were senior roles that I then needed to put them. I needed to make sure that they had the requisite experience that would have been required on those roles.
Well, let's talk about those people. I'm assuming that some of the people that were on the list that the Commissioner wanted you to get rid of included Mr. Yusuf Dinath, Mr. Kumaran Mudli, Mrs. Elmarie Jacobs. Am I right?
Not the ones he wanted me to appoint.
No, the ones he wanted you to get rid of.
Okay, so Elmarie Jacobs was not one of those.
Kumaran Mudli
Kumaran Mudli was one of those.
and Yusuf Dinath.
He was one of them.
And the people he wanted you to appoint, I'm assuming, were Mr. Mundi and Mr. Makanya.
Yes, they were.
See, I do have a series of questions for you around this. And I'd like to just take you through the evidence I've been given so we can try and clear this up. Yesterday, late in the afternoon, when Ms. Makola was testifying, I asked her about a memorandum that she had signed and sent to Mr. Kingan in June this year. And that memorandum is entitled Request for Access to SSA's Act 70 recording. And she writes a memo, she signs a memo, and then attaches to it a number of affidavits, and to that a number of emails. And I have provided you with all of that. And really the upshot of the memo is a story that is told through the affidavits that in June 2016, at the time you were the acting head of enforcement, I believe.
Yes.
The SSA brought to SARS's attention that they were in possession of a legally obtained intercept. And in that intercept, they said, SSA told SARS, there was a recording of Mr. Jürgen Mundi talking to a well-known cigarette smuggler. And he provided information to that smuggler about competing taxpayers, but also discussing SARS individuals with him, the SARS individuals who were actually trying to do their enforcement job in the illicit tobacco space. And the story continues that the relevant people in SARS brought it to Mr. Moyane's attention and suggested that Mr. Moyane get this recording from the SSA, which Mr. Moyane refused to do on the basis that he didn't like the tone of the request. Now, Mr. Moyane included you in the emails and the discussions and appears to have asked you to resolve it. The final email that I have is you writing to Yusuf Dinath, saying to him that you don't have the necessary information, the commissioner is out the country, and I'd like to have a meeting on his return. Whether or not you met, what we do know is that the commissioner never actually asked for that intercept, and it is only in the last couple of months that Mr. Kingan got the intercept. Does that accord with your understanding?
So I think we need to clarify two things in that. Number one is that Mr. Yusuf Dinath wrote to the commissioner asking for an audience between him and another staff member. Now, what I'm going to do in this a testimony is that I will refrain talking about individual members of staff unless you mention them. Because as I said in one of my statements, when all this is done, we will retain the responsibility to build this institution. And I think that I will be more comfortable dealing with issues, not necessarily the personalities, but where issues of personalities trumps having to mention them, I would gladly deal with that issue. So he wrote to the commissioner and asked for an audience, an email in which I was then included. The reason why I wrote to the commissioner directly is because an internal investigation at that point did not report to me. I was responsible for enforcement. Any enforcement, there is criminal investigation. So to the extent that whatever was going to be discussed will have involved criminal activities, I will have had to pick that up from the criminal investigation perspective. So he was dealing with the commissioner on this matter. Yes, I was involved. I asked, because the commissioner said to me, resolve this matter. I asked for Mr. Dinat to provide to me the information that he had been provided. He came back to me and said, no, the SSA contact is uncomfortable disclosing the information to SARS because they need to go talk to their legal people and all sorts of other things. He suggests that the commissioner deals with this matter, and he gave a name of a person the commissioner must deal with. I forwarded that same email to the commissioner to say, please note the response from the SSA. The commissioner responded back to say he doesn't deal with junior people because supposedly the person that Mr. Dinat had referred to was a junior person. I then followed that matter up with Mr. Dinat to say, do we have progress on this matter, because I would like to institute due process, because you said the matter that you were raising were time sensitive, which meant that we needed to act quite expeditiously. Mr. Dinat then came back to say, no, they are refusing. The commissioner must deal with that. The commissioner said he was not going to deal with the matter in the manner it was suggested. I then felt it was proper for me to then say to Mr. Dinat, particularly because it was not reporting to me, listen, thanks for the information you has given me. I'm unable to do anything with what I have because I have nothing. Let's wait for the commissioner to come back, and when the commissioner comes back, we can meet. I don't have a recollection whether that meeting ever happened or know what then happened with that particular issue. I don't know.
I wonder if I could ask you just to let me finish the chain of evidence, and then I'll open up. I accept all of that, Mr. Mathebula. My concern goes to the memorandum then on 10 August 2016. So that is a month after you have knowledge that the SSA has said, we have evidence that Mr. Mundi is in cahoots with a particular cigarette smuggler. Now, my problem is this, that this memo is from Mr. Jürgen Mundi to you. And it's asking you, it tells you that certain SARS officials, including a couple on the list that Mr. Miyane gave you, Mr. Kumaran Mudli and Mr. Yusuf Dinath. Mr. Mundi says these people are intimidating and harassing that self-same taxpayer, the self-same cigarette smuggler, among others, that the SSA has told you are in cahoots with Mr. Dinath. So Mr. Dinath comes along and he says,
Or in cahoots with Mr. Mundi.
Excuse me, with Mr. Mundi. So the memo said, Mr. Mundi's in cahoots with smuggler X. Mr. Mundi comes along with a memo and says, I have evidence that Mr. Mudli and Mr. Dinath are harassing smuggler X, as well as other people in the industry. And therefore, he says, I want authorization from you, Mr. Mathebula, for four things. And those four things are as follows. The first is that the South African Police Services and State Security Agency should be informed of their members' involvement in illegal activity because he also implicates people outside of SARS in harassing cigarette smugglers and others. A criminal case should be registered with the South African Police Services for further investigations to be conducted, is the second recommendation. The third is that disciplinary investigations should be conducted against the employees of the South African Revenue Services, and those are the ones listed, and we saw that Mr. Dinath then went through the process that the presiding officer said was a sham, and Mr. Moodley was put through his own process, which I don't want to discuss because it's not complete. Then he says a new team of auditors should be selected in order to conduct a re-audit of the aforementioned competitors of British American Tobacco. Because as I explained, this memo accused Mr. Dinath and Mr. Moodley and others of colluding with British American Tobacco to disadvantage Smuggler X and others.
Well,
Now,
can I just go through that? I'm not quite sure that I follow the whole sequence. Was there a report from SSA saying there is an intercept of a SARS official and a tobacco dealer that we think you should look at? Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. So I was going to answer that. So when that matter, when Mr. Dinath asked for a meeting with the commissioner to discuss a time-sensitive matter, no details were disclosed. So between June, when that meeting that we were trying to facilitate and me requesting for the information, which never came to me, and 10 August, when the memo came, I wasn't aware that the people in the memo that was authored were the same people that were involved in the meeting of with SSA, because that information was never provided to me.
Okay, just a minute. The first question I want to know is, what you say there was a request from SSA to SARS to information from SSA to SARS saying we have got an intercept, a SARS official is talking to a alleged tobacco smuggler and disclosing information. How do we know that?
we know that because we have 2 sworn affidavits and they're accompanied by emails. Now, the first affidavit is from the SARS employee with whom the SSA made contact. And he explains that an agent from the SSA made contact with him to tell him that they had this very worrying intercept. He says, I reported it to my manager. His manager then makes an affidavit. And his manager explains that he then escalated the matter within SARS, including to the commissioner. And that's where we get the emails. He attaches various emails. Now, he says...
Sorry, is his manager Mr. Dinath?
No, it's somebody else. He says on 30 June 2016, Yusuf, that's Yusuf Dinath, and I had a meeting with the commissioner and our chief officer, Hlengani Mathebula, where the contents of the intercepts were discussed.
Let's just stop there. Is that correct?
It spoke about the time-sensitive information, not the contents.
So you disagree with him? He says the contents of the discussion.
No, the contents of the intercept were never provided,
No,
which is the reason why I wrote back to say, can I have the information so that I can institute due process? And as the emails go back and forth, you'll recognize that I say, given that I have not been provided with this information, I'm unable to proceed. So,
I understand. I just want to get back to the meeting, though, with you. Did they say at the meeting there has been an intercept, according to the SSA?
yes.
And did they I would imagine you'd say, well, what kind of intercept? What was it or not? Did you just,
This is the information that was not provided.
did you ask them what intercept this was?
Yes.
What did they say?
They said it involved illegal activities that Mr. Jürgen Mundi was involved in, and that we needed to take steps immediately against Mr. Jürgen Mundi.
So at least the mention of Mr. Jürgen Mundi was made
Yes.
in the engagement with the commissioner in relation to the intercepts.
You see, my difficulty, Mr. Mathebula, is that you knew that the SSA had worrying information about Mr. Mundi. Mr. Mundi then comes to you with extraordinary allegations, actually, about Mr. Dinath and Mr. Moodley and others, and asks for your permission to discipline them. They're also on the list that the Commission has given you. They're also targeted. Now, you tell us it was against your conscience and against policy to go after these people. But in fact, you signed the memo that triggered the disciplinary hearings against them based on a memo written by somebody you knew was worrying the SSA for one reason or another. And I just wonder why you signed that memo.
Can I respond?
Please.
Okay, so I think you connect things that are unrelated. The first one is that I'm saying I did not have information that I could not simply by a person saying, listen, there is this information about this particular person alleging criminality. Please suspend this person, take steps, whatever the steps is that I need to take. I need to be informed by the information. I request that information, which was not provided to me, number one. Number two is that I think we need to make it very clear that at the time this happens, these people did not report to me. They reported to the commissioner. That's why they went to the commissioner. Mr. Jürgen Mundi was not reporting to me. Internal investigation was not reporting to me. My role was that of a chief officer of enforcement, which I would then have had to trigger investigation on matters that relates to criminal activity. I had nothing in my hand to do anything about that. Now, let's park that for a second. Secondly, is that the memo of the 10th of August, and I don't know till today, you are a lawyer and there's a judge here and a few other advocates. You can really clarify me. When a person comes and say, there is these agencies, law enforcement agencies in this country, whose competency is to deal with criminality, and there is this information, and all we are requesting is that we must engage into an investigation that will be led by this SAPS. In that they include the DPCI, must be involved with SSA itself, and in respect of internal people, we must then institute a proper disciplinary processes. I will, if I didn't support, and this is another element we are going to have to deal with, if I didn't support, I would have been found to have been acting or defeating the ends of justice, if in the event it were to be proven later that indeed these people are involved in any criminality. What I supported was criminal cases must be reported, the SAPS must be told, in respect of our internal people, we must institute disciplinary hearings when we have been able to investigate. In that memo you are referring to, there is pictures of there's pictures of intercepts in itself, there's pictures of false IDs and all that. Now, these are employees who, I'm just in August, 8 months in the organization, who had been in the organization for many years. They don't report to me. Their role is exactly that, to investigate. They were investigators of some repute in the organization. I had no other information that suggests that these people necessarily could have been up to something else. So I think my support, and because I did not authorize, the people did not report to me. If they reported to me, the final authority was on me. They didn't report to me, so mine is support. The final decision maker in that instance is the commissioner.
But Mr. Mathebula, you signed the memo, not Mr. Moyane.
I support it.
But I'm asking you, knowing what you knew. Now, I accept you didn't know the details of what the Intercept said about Mr. Mundi, but you knew the SSA were worried about Mr. Mundi. You also knew that some of these people listed were on Mr. Moyane's hit list. I'm saying in the face of that, why did you sign the memo?
I will repeat again. I signed the memo supporting that cases be reported to the SAPS, that investigations be done, that internal disciplinary process where people may have been found to have violated anything that we do should then be instituted. That it supposes that there's still more investigations that will be done. In the organization, there are HR policies. Everyone will be subjected to a fair process. I had no information that would have suggested to me that something else will be done other than what I was in my disposal at that time. So let me just deal with the issue of Mr. Dinant, because I was going to deal with it at some point.
I want to ask you a question first about what you've just said. What I can tell you as a lawyer is that the first principle, before you say somebody must be investigated and suspended, before you sign off on allowing that process to happen, is you hear them. You call them in. That is the first basic principle of natural justice, that before you subject to people to a long disciplinary process, you call them in and you say, what is your version? Did you do that?
So that is correct. So that's correct. But we saying
I asked you if you did that.
Because it doesn't apply.
So I just want to know, you didn't do that. You signed a memo authorizing an investigation and a suspension into certain people, but you didn't call them in first. Can I just get an answer to that?
Advocate, where do you see suspensions?
Sorry, can you just, sorry, Bill, you've got to let this go. You've got to let her finish. Let's just get an answer to the questions, because I would like to get clear answers. And I think, I've always said in the courts and wherever, the best rule to follow is that when you get asked a question, answer the question so we know what the answer is and there's no dispute. If you want to say more about it, then go on and do it. But we must get a clear answer to a clear question. Is that in order?
Yeah.
So the question again?
So my question is this. The third recommendation is disciplinary investigations should be conducted against the employees of the South African Revenue Service. By the way, it doesn't even say which. I'm just picking that up from the people named. I'm asking you, before you authorized disciplinary investigations being conducted, did you call those people in and ask them for their version of these events?
I didn't call them to ask them of their version of events because there were no versions that would have been put into them. I can't call people and say to them, there is going to be an investigations which may lead into disciplinary processes. So I didn't call them.
No, Mr. Mathebula, you've just told me that there was evidence in this. There was evidence of fake IDs, that laid the basis for your signature. Did you say to them, look, there's evidence of fake IDs, etc. Do you have an explanation?
So let me answer this again. The first answer is I did not call them. But can I ask you to explain? Can I explain to you? So that memo says there is information that has been obtained about people involved in illegal activities. And these people are colluding, which include members of the SAPS and our own staff, right? What we are asking for is that criminal investigations or docket be opened where investigations will have been concluded, 1. 2, investigations which may lead into disciplinary processes be instituted. Now, in this organization, advocate, when there is an issue around a person needing to be disciplined, they will have to be charged. Now, you can't charge people before you investigate what you want to investigate. You have to start by investigating and then decide that there is something that warrants you to even try to discipline somebody. Nowhere in that memo that I supported, I didn't authorize, that I supported, is there a suspension of people. Nowhere. And I wanted to say further, advocate, that with reference to Mr. Dinat specifically, that when Mr. Makanya came to me to want to suspend Mr. Dinat, I refused, because the information that he then provided me to say, on the basis of this information, I want to suspend Mr. Dinat. I said to him, no, you can't suspend the employee on this information, because this information, he had already been subjected to some process before I even arrived in this institution. I refused. He left my office and went to my executive assistant and said, would you support this? My executive assistant said, no, we're not going to support this. This information is old information. So in all instances, advocate, we, and me in particular in this instance, where an employee was either being dealt with unfairly and I had contrary information, I have been able to say, no, this can't happen. And Mr. Dinat is a case in point.
Well, I don't agree in that at law, when you are going to make a decision to recommend and authorize a disciplinary investigation into someone, that, just like a suspension, is a decision that has adverse consequences for that person. And it is proper to say to that person, before I make the decision, can I hear your view? And that did not happen. And there was a chain of events that followed. And I appreciate that you then tried to stop it. But I put to you that it's improper, particularly in this context where it's coming from Mr. Mundi, to authorize an investigation into people without asking them for their side of the story.
Anyway, I think you've answered that. You say you see it differently, and so, okay.
If you would help me, Council, just with a few things. I need a bit of chronology clear here. Firstly, there was the reference to the list that was provided to you by the Commissioner on persons to be investigated. I would need just the chronology. When was that done? The second point, I would want to understand the approach by Mr. Dinat in relation to the application to get the intercepts from the SSA, and thirdly, the request by Mr. Mundi for some of the for those actions to be taken, and if you would indulge me, Council, if you could also just go back to that memo of Mr. Mundi and go through that list of the items that were required to be done, because I would want to get clear answers from Mr. Mathebula around each of those points, around which one was being supported or not supported in his version. And finally, what's on that memo, I would want to understand, at the end of the memo, there would probably be something around recommend to approve, support. If I could get what was set out in the memo in the conclusion of the memo relating to the authorizations, etc.?
Certainly. There's one question I can't answer out of those. I don't know when Mr. Mathebula was given the list.
Well, can you tell us, do you have a date when you were given the list?
No, I don't have
I'm sure
it.
you can't get the exact date perhaps, but give us the best you can.
No, I don't have a date, but it was very soon after I was appointed as the acting a CO of enforcement, which would have been somewhere around April.
So did it precede all of those other, the
Yes.
Dinath matter and the Mundi matter?
Yes.
That list
Is that
preceded
correct?
those?
Yes, no,
Preceded
that's
that,
correct.
yes. And then the next,
So first the list. Then came the intercepts and the discussion around them. That was in June and July 2016.
that would be correct, is it, Mr. Mathebula?
Yes, that's correct.
Then the memo, the Mr. Mundi memo, that is dated 10 August 2016. So that's the chronology. So we have list, information from SSA about Mr. Mundi, and then Mr. Mundi's memo. Now,
Then what I've asked in relation to,
To
just
the
your indulgence, just a
Of
repeat
course.
of each of those items, was I would want to hear direct responses to each of those
Of
in relation
course.
of those items that were sought to be dealt with.
so the final paragraph says recommendations, and there appear to be 4. The first is the South African Police Services and the State Security Agency should be informed of their members' involvement in illegal activities. The second is a criminal case should be registered with the South African Police Services for further investigations to be conducted.
Maybe just on the first list around people to be reported to the SSA regarding members of the SSA who were involved in illegal activities, are those individuals named there in this memo?
The
I don't need the names, but
Yes,
just want to know whether there's a schedule of that.
As I remember, the individuals named are SARS people. The fact that the SSA and the SAPS are also involved is there, but as I recall, those names aren't mentioned. But I stand to be corrected. I'll look through it again.
Because I need clarity around this, because this is with reference to reporting people of another agency. And I want to understand whether there was an understanding by Mr. Mathebula around the individuals of those external agencies in respect of whom there had to be some reporting.
I'd like to give it another read, but I do not recall any names being mentioned except the SARS employees who were said to be collaborating with British American Tobacco, and the people who they were said to be intimidating, the taxpayers they were intimidating, who we mentioned recently, Mr. Kaji, Mr. Liftman, and Mr. Edward Zuma. Those are the names mentioned. I have no memory of the SSA people being mentioned, but I will check.
Because I'm just trying to get to an understanding of each of those items around. You requested to do this in relation to item 1, and get a sense around, was there clarity around that? And then each of those, was I just really, to understand the response of Mr. Mathebula, I want to get on each of those items. And on also to understand the information that was provided to justify the request or recommendation in relation to each of those items.
Mr. Kachel, let me just read the findings, because the findings come just before the recommendation. The findings. It is clear that members of the South African Police Service, members of the South African Revenue Services, and members of the State Security Agency has transgressed by supply privilege information to FSS, that's the security arm of British American Tobacco, in order for them to harass and hamper the trading of legitimate tobacco companies of South Africa. This gave BAT an unfair advantage in the trade of tobacco in South Africa. The activities of the members working for the respective enforcement agencies were illegal and should be reported to the South African Police Services for further investigations. The audit inspections of the competitors of BAT and Mark Liffman were done unfairly and with malicious intention. Those are the findings. Now, the recommendations are no more specific. So when they say people should be reported, you have to try and pick up in the body of the report which people. Now, the names I picked up are the SARS people, and I didn't see other names.
And those names of SARS are set out in the memo.
Well, they come up in the story of the so-called evidence against these people. They're mentioned. Those names are mentioned. But nowhere does it say, recommendation, these individuals be reported. The recommendations are general.
Would finalize that list of
Yes.
4 or so items,
Yes.
please?
So we said one was that the police and the SSA should be informed of their members' involvement. As I recall, those members are named. 2, a criminal case should be registered with the South African Police Services for further investigations to be conducted. 3, disciplinary investigations should be conducted against the employees of the South African Revenue Services. 4, a new team of auditors should be selected in order to conduct a re-audit on the aforementioned competitors of BAT, including Mr. Liffman, who, by the way, it was said is not a competitor of BAT. But in any event, he's been harassed. Those are the recommendations. And then underneath that, it says, compiled by Jürgen Mundi, Acting Senior Manager, 10 August 2016, and he signs. And then under that, there's an option, supported or not supported. Supported is ringed. Mr. Hlengani Mathebula, misspelt, Chief Officer Enforcement, 10 August 2016, and what appears to be Mr. Mathebula's signature is there.
That was perhaps I've missed something, but did anyone then ever look at this, hear this intercept?
No, it's only now that it was it was obtained.
So let me get it correct then. There's the report that there is an intercept, and you know that there is an intercept, and what you have said that intercept is about is SARS people talking to. That's what you were told in your meeting with the commissioner. We've had that.
You know, now I was only told that there is some alleged criminality against Mr. Jürgen Mundi. The rest of the storyline.
Yeah, but there's an intercept. You knew there was an intercept, and it was alleged that we learned through this intercept that there is criminality on the part of Mr. Mundi. And that then, and that after that, we get Mr. Mundi saying SARS people are harassing the tobacco dealers and Mr. Liffman, and you then recommend that that should occur. What happened to getting the intercept? As I understand, you said earlier, the commissioner said, I don't like your tone, and therefore I'm not going to get the intercept. What happened to the intercept? Why has it only come out now? What year was that?
So this was in the middle of 2016, June 2016.
And has that intercept never been listened to by you or anyone else?
Judge, it would not have been listened by me, so I have never listened to it. So
Well,
let me
that's
just
what I asked, not
let me
would
just
have.
answer that.
Was it listened to you by you? Did
No,
you
I
ever
did-
get it?
No, I never got it, which is the reason why my email said I was never provided with the information, so I am unable to do anything without any information.
But I don't quite understand why one set about disciplining or set about investigating without having got the intercept to see what was going on. I don't quite follow. I mean, you've told there's an intercept. Am I wrong? You've told that there's an intercept. You've told that the intercept indicates criminality on the part of Mr. Mundi. You then say, Mr. Mundi says, go and investigate these people, and no one investigates Mr. Mundi. I don't quite understand.
So, Judge, I think, let me just again re-explain the that sequence. So, in June 2016,
Yes.
internal investigation did not report to me. But I was asked to sit into a meeting
Yes.
in which conversations around time-sensitive information,
Yes.
which was not disclosed to me,
Yes.
and the commissioner asking me to say, can you deal with this matter? And in dealing with the matter, I write to Mr.
So
Dinner.
can I stop you? What do you mean by dealing with this matter? Do what with what matter?
Whatever time-sensitive information it was,
Sorry, say again?
whatever the time-sensitive information which amounted to some illegal activity on the
Yes.
part of Mr.
Yes.
Mundi.
But now, what did the commissioner say to you about, what did he mean by deal with this matter?
I assumed what he needed me to do
Yeah.
was that I must then investigate the matter.
But I mean, then wouldn't you ask for the intercept?
I did.
And did
It
you
wa-
get, why didn't you get?
It was not provided to me.
So who did you ask?
No, I asked Mr. Dinert.
For the intercept?
Yes.
But you had to ask the SSA for the intercept.
No, Judge. No. So let me clarify this. I'm saying I asked Mr. Dinert
Yeah.
to provide me with the information. He came
Provide
back
you with the intercept.
with the information. I didn't know whether that was the intercept.
But
But
let's just
provide-
stop with, let's just, I'm very slow. You've got to take it slowly with me, step by step. You've told that there's an intercept, and the intercept implicates Mr. Mundi in criminal activity. Did you ask for the intercept?
Yes, I did.
And who did you ask for the intercept?
Mr. Dinert.
But Mr. Dinath hasn't got the intercept. It's the SSA that's got the intercept. How does Mr. Dinath get the intercept from the SSA?
So Mr. Dinert was dealing, or the person that reports to Mr. Dinert was dealing with an agent from the SSA that they were dealing together. So his emails,
Yeah.
the email exchanges between them, suggest that Mr. Dinert went back to say, listen, because that was the person that we were interacting with. We would like to provide this information to our chief officer. The person responds back to say, no, we are going to ask our legal department. After they have interacted, they then say, no, the SSA is uncomfortable. Maybe the commissioner should ask Mr. X to provide this information. I take that information, those emails, I give them to the commissioner to say, for me to do anything, it is suggested that you must ask,
Ask
Mr.
the
Commissioner.
SSA.
You must ask the
Yes,
SSA for
correct.
this information. The commissioner then says, no, I don't deal with junior people. And the matter rests there.
But hang
Remember
on.
again.
Sorry, he says, I don't deal with junior people, so I won't ask for the intercept.
Yes. So he doesn't say I'm not going to ask. He says I don't deal with junior people, which may suggest that it says I'm not going to ask them.
But sorry, I'm interrupting you. Just trying to get this picture correct, if you don't mind.
The issue here, Judge, is that I think a wrong person is being asked to explain this, and
You're not the wrong person. I'm asking you, and if you don't know things, you tell me.
Yeah,
So just
I
stop
don't
a
know
minute. Just
why
stop
the
a minute.
commissioner
Just stop a
decided.
minute. Just stop a minute. Let's go take this slowly, step by step, and let's get clear answers so we can move on. We've got a lot of work. We must move on. You were told there is this intercept.
Yes.
You must deal with the matter. You ask for DNOT for the intercept, and you comes back that the commissioner must ask.
Yes.
So you tell the commissioner he must ask for the intercept. I've got it right.
Yes.
Commissioner says, I don't deal with junior people. And there the matter rests. Well, why didn't you then say, but we've got to get the intercept? That's the first step. Why did you let it rest if you know there's an intercept of conversations taking place between alleged criminals and SARS? That's what I don't understand. Why did you let it rest? Sorry, let it rest, and instead then go and ask for a disciplinary of Mundi or investigation of Mundi?
No, not Mundi.
Sorry,
DNAT.
no, DNAT at the instance of Mundi. It doesn't make sense to me.
No, Judge.
Okay. What about?
And at some point we'll let it go. But I'm saying.
We'll let it go. When, the problem with me, I hate mysteries.
Yes.
So I want the pieces to fall
So
into
I'm
place.
saying that in this instance, this unit report to the commissioner. So reporting to the commissioner, I then suggest guys, now that there is this chain of command that must be followed, which excludes me, when the commissioner comes back, I will ensure that the commissioner calls a meeting between yourselves and himself, which I duly did. The commissioner did not call that meeting, or if he did, I was not involved. Now,
You know, Mr. Mathebula, I must interrupt you because you're not dealing with my problems, so we don't get anywhere. The commissioner has said to you, there's an allegation that SARS people are meeting with criminals. You deal with it, Mr. Mathebula, by which he means, so you deal with it by saying, well, I need the intercept. You obviously thought you did need the intercept. Correct. That's why you asked for it. Correct.
yes,
But you never got the intercept.
yes.
You went to the commissioner and said, well, you've got to ask for the intercept. The commissioner said, I don't deal with that. But you haven't dealt with the problem yet, which he left with you, which is to get the intercept. And that's why I don't understand why you didn't do more to get the intercept. Can you tell me what
Well, maybe I could have done more, but I didn't. But I asked the commissioner to do what he was asked of him to do, because in this instance, the relationship between the SSA and SARS was then governed. And my assumption, Judge, when the commissioner says I don't deal with junior people, and I'm going to refer to this at a later stage, is that I know for a fact that the commissioner was in constant contact with the DG of SSA. Now, it would have meant that maybe he was going to be dealing with that information in that regard. There was an MOU between SSA and SARS, and there were certain people that were designated to deal with SSA, and I was not one of those.
Now, let me just understand. The commissioner says I don't deal with junior people. Is there anyone who then suggests that write to the DG instead of the junior person? Or do we just then leave the issue of seeking the intercepts at that point?
No, it says
The commissioner doesn't want to deal with junior people. Does it then end there, or is the suggestion, well, you can contact the DG to seek this intercept, or is that the end?
The commissioner was going to talk to the DG.
On the intercept?
Yeah, on that matter. He was going to deal with the DG, and this is the reference to he doesn't deal with the junior person, who is this person that was referred to.
So, according to that version, the intercept was not going to be sought from the NIA, from SAS by yourself. It was going to be by the commissioner through engaging the DG of SAS.
Yes.
How do you know that?
No, because we have had conversations about
Sorry?
it. Because we did have a conversation about it. Because when he said...
Sorry, did the commissioner say, don't worry, I'll get it from the DG?
When he said, I don't deal with junior people, I had a telephone conversation with him to say, but how are you going to deal with this matter? And he was going to deal with the DG.
Is that what he told you?
Yes.
Sorry, just one question I don't understand.
Give me a moment. I just got to get this clear. So then he told you he was going to get it from the DG. And then did you go back to him and say, have you got it from the DG?
No, I left the matter there.
You left the matter, so you never followed that up, and you never asked the commissioner what this intercept was about?
No.
And then you just acted on Mr. Mundi's recommendation to investigate these other people, is that right? And you didn't know what the criminal activity was that Mr. Mundi is alleged to have been involved in?
Yes, I didn't know what the criminal activity was, Judge. And when on the 10th, when this memo came, and it's important to look at the recommendation indicates that where there is criminal, that SSA must be informed of their members that are involved in criminal activity. The South African police must be involved. A criminal case must be registered. I would have struggled not to support a situation where somebody says, I need to deal with law enforcement agencies.
I just got a bit of a problem here, because earlier on you said to me, the commissioner said, I don't deal with junior people, and you said there the matter rested. Now you tell me that you actually spoke to the Commissioner and said you must speak to the DG, and he said he would speak to the DG. Now, which one is correct?
On email.
Sorry?
On email.
What?
The email said from the Commissioner when he responded to what I said to him, this is the feedback
Yes.
from the team. He responded to say, I don't deal with junior people.
And there you said earlier, that's where the matter rested.
And I said, in respect of those exchanges, that's where the matter rested.
But that's not
I
what
did-
you said.
No,
Just
no.
look, do you want to hear the record again?
No,
You said
can I-
there
can-
is what the matter rested,
Yeah,
not
that's
there
fine,
the
but-
email rested.
Yeah, but can I finish? Judge?
Certainly.
So because me and the Commissioner used to converse, and on this matter we did converse, and I did indicate, so how would he then deal with this matter? And he indicated he was going to deal with the DG because the person that was referred to him was junior.
Yes. Okay, you want to ask him
Sorry,
questions?
just one, you said that he asked you to deal with the matter. The judge asked you what was meant. If he was dealing with the DG, why would he ask you to deal with the matter?
It is in the beginning that he asks me to deal with the matter. At the first meeting when we were sitting, when he said, this information was shared and asked me to deal with it. And in my dealing with it, I wrote to the staff member concerned to say, can I have the information so that I can then institute due process? The employee comes back to me to say, listen, SSA is reluctant to give us the information. They are going to consult their lawyers, which is in the email. And finally, it says, no, SSA is not going to provide this information. The Commissioner must ask it from Mr. X, to which I then take that information, pass it to the Commissioner, and the Commissioner responds, I do not deal with junior people. Supposedly, this person, who is Mr. X, that the Commissioner doesn't want to deal with. I then had a conversation with him later to say, so how are you going to deal with the matter? And he said, no, he will talk to the DG of the SSA. And I do know that the Commissioner and the DG of SSA quite often conversed, quite often the DG of SSA came to SARS.
Now, I need to just another follow-up. You don't get the intercepts for some time. You don't know what's the situation around, what is the content of those intercepts. Mr. Mundi comes and recommends certain actions to be taken. Did you ever get to discuss why we would proceed with getting advice or recommendations from Mr. Mundi in relation to actions to be taken against other people when you've still not have established what are the allegations concerning him as set out in those intercepts? Was there ever a follow-up around the intercepts, particularly in light of now getting the request by Mr. Mundi to investigate others?
So my response to that, Mr. Cutler, I indicated that I did not.
The next question I just wanted to have, just on your chronology, very early on you got the list from the Commissioner around people who were to be investigated. You were uncomfortable with that investigation. Could you help me just understand the shift from that moment to the moment of the Mundi email the Mundi memo that you then support? Because it deals with pretty much the same individuals that you had been asked previously to suspend or to take this, investigative actions in respect of.
No, it doesn't. Not all. Not all. So I said that I was given a list of people that were supposedly part of the rogue unit. And unless you insist, okay. I'm not going to give the names. But I'm quite happy to give you those names in camera, and I did indicate to the evidence leader. At that point, I said to the Commissioner, I'm uncomfortable based on the information that you have given me and how you say you got it. I do not have anything to go on to investigate these people. When later, people unrelated, plus the ones that, one or two that may have been in that list, are mentioned. And the biggest thing for me here is we will register a criminal case. In my unlawyer mind, I'm saying when a person says we're going to register a criminal case, I can't stop a criminal case being investigated. When a person says to me we must inform the South African police of their members' involvement in criminal activities, I thought I need to support that. When a member says the SSA must be informed of their members' involvement in criminal activity, at the very least I can do is to support. And I supported that. What tends, Mr. Katla, what tends is that what then happens post the memo. Because when the unit now reported to me from the 1st of September, administratively, and then later in 2017, Mr. Gobi Makanya comes and say, here is a memo that I want to suspend Mr. Dinat about, who is part of that list. I then say to him, look, Mr. Makanya, on the basis of the information that you have, I am quite aware that this specific member or staff member was subjected to some process in the past. I can't support this action to suspend him. He then leaves, and he then leaves and go wherever he has gotten the authorization to then suspend Mr. Dinat. But I was not involved in that.
Just in the ordinary course, I need to understand, you've made a lot about what you're suggesting, that Mr. Mundi at the time of that memo did not report to you. Yes. Why was your support sought on this matter if you were not in the line of command around it?
Because there was going to be issues around criminal investigations that would have had to be done, and criminal investigations fell within enforcement.
Yeah, let me just tell you, quite frankly, I find it astonishing that it's reported that an EXCO member and the Commissioner have had a report from the SSA that they have an intercept of a SARS official engaging in a conversation with alleged tobacco smugglers, and that nothing happens. Now, you might say to me, well, it's not in my area of responsibility. Well, whether it is or not, I mean, you're an EXCO member. And I've just read again you saying that we need to rebuild and preserve the reputation of SARS and so forth. How can one do that when an EXCO member who knows of an intercept between a SARS official and alleged smugglers does nothing? How do you build the reputation of SARS on that? And you say the answer is, well, it's not my responsibility.
So Judge, I'm sure we can take this one incident. I think this one incident must be...
It's a very important incident.
No, it is a very important incident, but I think we can take this one incident and then test what my actions were subsequent to that particular incident.
Well, your actions were nothing, as I understand it.
But I didn't participate in Mr. Dinat's suspension. Yes. I actually opposed it.
Okay.
I actually, and Mr. Dinat can be recalled here, I actually offered Mr. Dinat and his lawyers a chance.
Yes.
And said to him, if ever my name were to be used in your disciplinary process, you must insist that I be called as a witness. If my name were to be used, you can call him back. He will testify to that because I gave it.
Should we move on with, or not?
No, I just say we accept that. We don't need to call Mr. Dinat back. But your signature triggered the sham investigation against him. That's the only point I'm making. Not that you later suspended him. That signature set the chain of events in motion.
So No, what Mr. Dinard was finally suspended on, and what Mr. Gobimakanya had brought to me, seems to have been entirely very different to this what Mr. Hlengani Mundi was talking about. It may have included that, but in the main it was very different. As I said, those charges had been dealt with before, and I was uncomfortable and I wouldn't support it. I was very clear about that, and I didn't support it.
Okay, well, then let's carry on with the chain of events. You mentioned the 1st of September, which was a fateful day. On the 1st of September, Judge and panelists, there is another memo from Mr. Hlengani Mundi to Mr. Hlengani Mathebula. And this is called Tactical Intervention Unit Investigations. And the recommendation identified members to seconded to the DPCI project. Now, what this memorandum, it says the purpose of this memorandum is to request from senior management authority for identified members to work on a project which has been established by the South African Police Service in order to have a dedicated investigative capacity to investigate high level of corruption and fraud within the tobacco industry. A syndicate which consists of SAPS, DPCI, FSS, TISA, BAT, and SARS officials colluded in victimizing and hampering the trade of competitors of BAT by making use of state resources in illegal searches, audits, raids, illegal intercepts of communication. The background it gives is, it says, due to the complexity of the syndicate, it's been agreed that members of the South African Revenue Service would form part of the task team to address the syndicates operating within the tobacco industry, especially the SARS officials. And it would appear this task team is the tobacco task team we heard about a couple of days ago. It then goes on to a heading investigations, and it says, statements were obtained and senior members of SARS have been identified that are part of the syndicate that are conducting illegal activities within the tobacco industry, etc. And that, I would imagine, refers to the 10th of August memo. Those people were identified within SARS. Media releases of affidavits and evidence through Twitter account Tobacco SA Espionage has posted crucial evidence on a daily basis. A criminal docket has been registered, to wit, Johannesburg Central gives the case number, where a SARS official has been implicated in serious transgressions and criminal offences. A project has been established with the following objectives: to gather information pertaining to criminal activities of SARS employees surrounding the tobacco industry. This includes mainly syndicated crime, but also includes singular offensive. And then there are other objectives about gathering information and establishing working relationships with the other law enforcement agencies and reducing human risk, human frailties, and their negative impact. It says that the workload of the different government agencies, and it says what SARS will do, what the NPA will do, and what SAPS will do. What SARS will do is this: SARS criminal investigations, in brackets tax evasion, and internal investigations will be conducted and are being dealt with as long-term criminal and disciplinary cases of SARS employees. The findings are that there should be a joint task team between the various enforcement agencies. Well, it actually says it has been established, so that's already been established. The following team members have been identified from SARS to assist the team, and it lists 5 people. And then it says the following resources are required: 2 pool vehicles. The cost of traveling of the task team members should fall within the cost center of the chief officer. Enforcement for purposes of secrecy and security of the task team members. and a boardroom at Riverwalk will be used in the interim until a safe house has been identified for the task team members. The recommendations: it's urgently requested that the resources be made available immediately, since the aforementioned agencies has already started the project, and it will be crucial for the SARS members to be part of the project from the inception. The project plan has been drafted by the SAPs, and a copy will be made available for SARS. The prediction is that the project will take approximately 6 months to a year.
Just remind me, what is that memorandum?
What do you mean, Judge?
Remind me, that memorandum is written by?
So that again is written by Mr. Mundi and signed by Mr. Mathebula.
The date?
1st September 2016.
That is your memorandum, is it, Mr.
Yeah,
Mathebula?
that is.
Well, the question before we get on to explanation, the question I put to Mr. Lebello yesterday, which he said I should direct to you, or agreed I should direct to you, is this: that 1 year ago, SARS had said that this kind of activity and purchasing this kind of equipment is unlawful. And I'm interested to know how the same organization 1 year later thought it wasn't unlawful.
Which equipment?
So, 2 pool vehicles. The cost of traveling of the task team members should fall within the cost center of the chief officer, enforcement, for the purposes of secrecy and security of the team members. A boardroom at Riverwalk will be used in the interim until a safe house has been identified for the task team members. Now, you'll recall that the so-called rogue unit was said to be rogue because of secrecy, because of intelligence activities, etc. Now, this suggests to me safe houses, secrecy, special vehicles, protecting identities, that this is setting up precisely the kind of intelligence unit that SARS had said the year before was unlawful.
Okay. So I think we should just answer the issue around the equipment as you ask. So there was no equipment that I have authorized to be purchased. 2 pool vehicles are SARS vehicles that will be accounted for by the SARS fleet. The cost center being in the chief officer cost center, that will be on normal business, because it will have, the cost center will have to be controlled by a chief officer for purposes of making sure that what is being dispensed there, the chief officer will know. And to my knowledge, unless something that I do not know, which is very unlikely, has been done, there's nothing that untoward that was done in that cost center when I was in control of it. A boardroom at Riverwalk, a boardroom was actually my insistence that this team can operate anywhere else other than a SARS building where their movements are known. So that was my insistence. The issue of the safe house, there was never a safe house that was ever utilized, but that is beside the point. The point is that it was mentioned here, and I think that was simply an oversight on my part.
But just read that again. It said a boardroom until you find a safe house.
Yes.
So it's not no, just stop for a minute. I'm slow, Mr. Mathebula, please. A boardroom, you weren't going to use the boardroom always. We just use it as a temporary thing, and then we'll go to a safe house. Now, I don't quite understand your answer that you insisted that it should always, you should always have a boardroom.
Yeah. So Judge, maybe let me give you a bit of background on this matter, because I think.
Sorry, could you just tell me what you meant? Which is correct? Was this going to be a boardroom that would be permanent, or a boardroom until you had a safe house?
it was a boardroom that that will be permanent, that this team will have to operate from.
But it says until a safe house.
Now, that part, I said, that may have been my oversight, because, and hence I'm saying, if you indulge me, I could give you a bit of an explanation on how.
Just a minute, you say it may have been an oversight. Was it an oversight?
No, it was an oversight. So if you indulge me, I can give you.
Yes, certainly.
an
I just want to
Great.
hear the answers
No,
to
no, that's
questions.
fine.
You understand that. It's
Yeah,
very
no.
important that I should not get it wrong.
Yeah, no,
For
that's
your
true.
interest, that I should not get it wrong, so I should get clear answers from you.
That's true.
You understand that. It's in your interest, otherwise I make a mistake and then everyone says, but you didn't listen to me.
Yeah, no, that's true. So I made this explanation to Advocate Steinbeck when I met with her, to say that this memo, in effect, had been doing a toing and froing between myself and the commissioner for some time before I finally signed it on the 1st of September. Now, why was the need for this toing and froing? It was because in the initial memo that there were a lot of things which I thought mirrored some of the things that I had read about in the media. And I insisted that that memo be changed drastically to reflect that which finally ended up being what I had signed. And the reason I'm saying it was an oversight is because that last part, I then did not see that because I had insisted. The rest of the other things had now been done in the manner that I had asked. So that one last sentence was not. And to mitigate that, when the matter was then raised and this memo was leaked in the media, I insisted that offices be found. I insisted that they are co-located with the internal investigation unit, which Mr. Dinat and his colleagues had protested that they cannot be located with them. And I insisted that there was no way that this team was going to operate anywhere else other than an identified SARS building.
Well, that's my difficulty, let me tell you, is that this was foremost in your mind. You insisted on this, and yet there's an oversight. I would have thought that is the one thing in the memorandum that there would not be an oversight on. But anyway, you say it's an oversight.
It was.
Well, you've heard what I say. It astonishes me, but do you want to say any more about why it was an oversight?
No, I can't say any more other than the fact that the reason I say it went toing and froing, and this is the part, Judge, that I said to you in my consultation with you that I would have been uncomfortable saying, but let me say it anyway because we're sitting here.
Don't say anything you feel uncomfortable about. I'm not asking you to put yourself in discomfort. You understand that?
No, it's important that because the other members were not there when we spoke. This memo for 2 weeks or so, Yegan had come to me to say, I must sign this memo. And I was uncomfortable. And I said to the commissioner, because this unit really reports to you, I will want you to sign the memo. The commissioner, on one day when we were sitting, I think it was after an EXCO meeting, in his office here in Hilton, came to an office next to mine and said, can we walk downstairs? We walked downstairs and he requested that we leave our phones. And I walked down with him. I did not have any reason to doubt or to suspect anything, or rather, let me say I didn't suspect that there could be anything. We sat in my car, and the commissioner called me by my clan name and said, please sign that memo. And I said, but why? He said, just sign the memo. I said, I'm still uncomfortable. He said, no, they have included the changes you have requested. Please sign the memo. I said, but I'm uncomfortable. He said, no, please sign the memo. Then he related a story to me, which I'm going to relate now. He said to me, Makuba, I was with these people. And these people said to me, tell your kin that we know where he stays, we know where he comes from, we know which school he had gone to. That sent a chill down my spine on that day. And because it appeared a very ominous threat. And that may explain the oversight that I later then had on the matter. But I can't excuse the fact that I had an oversight. But I need to explain that this memo had done towing and froing, and subsequent to that conversation, I then signed the memo. But the suggestion that I had been put,
Yes.
and that specific line, I had not.
Well, that suggests that he might have signed something you didn't want to sign, but it doesn't suggest that it's an oversight. Quite the opposite. So was it an oversight, or was it, did you feel under duress to sign it? Which one is it?
Look, I'm saying that.
Sorry, I must insist, Mr. Mathebula, that we get answers. The question is...
I would say it was under duress then.
It was under duress, not an oversight. Correct?
Yeah.
But you said you were comfortable signing this earlier.
Yes, but I'm saying to you that this memo, the stuff that I had requested that be included, were included. And having had the conversation that I had now had, everything that's here, other than that specific line, looked exactly as the things that I had worked on. And this happens at the back of this specific conversation. So I was taking personal responsibility here when I'm saying it's an oversight on my part. But I need to make that within the context of what had happened earlier.
But that doesn't explain. You told the judge you signed under duress. You say, but actually the memo had been changed so that you were comfortable with it. Now, it's either one or the other.
The oversight relates to that sentence, that specific sentence. The judge then says, it then appears that you may have signed this under duress, and it can't be both. So which one is going to be? And then I said, well, then I've signed it under duress in that instance, but it's not what always I've thought about it as signing under duress. So that specific line, I'd acknowledge that I had taken a personal responsibility that, no, given that the rest of the things are there, I may have necessarily then missed that, but there is that background on this specific matter.
I'm afraid I don't understand.
Well, that's the answer.
Okay.
Just a quick question. Did the commissioner ever tell you why he saw fit that you should sign and not him?
I had insisted many times that he must sign it because the team was reporting to him. But in this instance, he insisted that I should be the one signing it.
But did he ever explain to you why he was not going to be the one signing, given that the team reported to him and not you?
No. In that instance, he didn't. But if you then take into account what then subsequently happens, I can fully understand why he wouldn't have.
Mr. Mathebula, I'm struggling with a few things. I'm just going to go back to the issue of the intercept. My struggle there is the commissioner gives you an instruction to deal with the matter as a chief officer of SARS. You deal with a junior person at SSA, you then send an email or forward an email to the commissioner, a response from the junior person saying the commissioner must maybe contact somebody from SSA. And so you didn't do what the commissioner asked you to do. You didn't execute the instruction at your level. I struggle with that. And with regards to this memo, you said this memo had been going to and fro, and it still has something that you don't like, and you just signed the memo. I'm not belittling what you've just explained, as to the pressure and all that, but I struggle with that as well.
Okay, so back to the SSA matter, I didn't deal with the SSA member. I dealt with Mr. Dinat, who was the manager. So he's the one that dealt with the person that the commissioner classified as junior. I didn't deal with that person.
But the instruction was given to you by the commissioner to deal with the matter, isn't it?
Yes, but I subsequently reported back on the matter, on how I was dealing with the matter. I requested, the information was not provided to me. There was nothing that I could do any further. And once it was a request suggested that the commissioner, it was not suggested that the chief officer must. The matter now had been escalated to say the commissioner must request the information. And remember, these are people that have been in this institution for many years. And I really have no reason to doubt what they are asking of me to do. And I then process that information in the manner that I'm being asked to do. That's number one in respect of that particular issue. In respect of this one, if you look at that memo, you will see that I actually initialed it at the bottom, because I thought that all the information that I had requested that be done is there. And yes, I was off-cited on that specific one line. The rest of information, I can put my hand on my heart and say that information, if you gave it to me today and say this is what needed to be done, I would have done. Other than that one aspect about a safe house.
Well, I've got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
On this subject.
Yes. Did you, at the time, report to anybody that you had been threatened in this way?
Report to anybody as such as?
The minister, the president,
That you'd been
the
threatened.
police, that you'd been threatened in this way? I mean, your family had been threatened. Did you tell anyone? Did you take steps?
No, I actually didn't. I actually didn't in this regard. I mean, this is something that I would not have fathomed, that the commissioner didn't say he personally was threatening me. He didn't say he was threatening me. He said these people that he was dealing with, and I asked to be provided with this information. He didn't provide me with that information of the people that he was talking about. But he was clearly concerned himself, and that made for my fear around the issue. But I thought that's okay. That was the first incident. If you want to deal with whether I ever reported any matter around threats, yes, I have.
No, I'm asking that matter.
This specific one, I
Yes.
didn't report it to anybody.
And these people, is that the members of the tobacco industry, or is it other people? Who is these people?
I don't know. The commissioner has never told me who those people were.
You didn't find it puzzling that he didn't give you any indication around the people who have this information about you?
Mr. Cutler, the commissioner was sufficiently, or looked sufficiently scared himself in that instance. And I really did not process it further than the fact that the commissioner had, for over a period of 2 weeks, pleaded with me to sign this memo, and I had requested that certain changes be made, and those changes had subsequently then been made. But one line that I had not necessarily, upon my signing, I had not seen, or I had not taken note of, had been this issue around the safe house. Only that I was off-sided on that, and answer say, you could say off-sided, or could say, as the judge indicated to me, that was under duress. I will accept that.
No, I didn't indicate to you. I asked you. I wasn't there. I don't know who's doing what. I asked you to tell me, was it because you made a mistake, or because you felt under duress? Your answer was, you felt under duress. Now, please don't say, I told you you were under duress. I've got no idea.
That's fine, Judge. Okay. There will be other instances that will prove that anyway.
I asked a question which you haven't answered. My question was, in 2015, SARS reached the view that it was unlawful for it to have any intelligence gathering capacity at all. And SARS spent millions and millions on this. And as the whole country knows, kicked out a whole lot of people, criminal charges, disciplinary charges. 1 year later, there is a memo saying we need to set up an intelligence gathering committee. I just don't understand the contradiction, and I wonder if you can explain it.
There is no intelligence gathering committee here. There's a team that will look at the issues around tobacco. There's a team that we must protect their identity because they are going to be dealing with criminal syndicates. So you needed to make sure that this team, you do not necessarily expose them to harm. And this is the reason why their movements needed to be controlled or be monitored in a manner that would not expose them to harm.
No, this memo says that the project has as its very first objective to gather information pertaining to criminal activities of SARS employees surrounding the tobacco industry. Now, gathering information is what SARS had called intelligence activities. That's what intelligence is at the first level. It's gathering information. And it goes on to say these people must be allowed to operate in secret. How is that different to what SARS said the year before was unlawful?
I can't answer for what SARS had done a year before because I wasn't there. But I can say to you that this team was to join a team from the SAPS, from the South African Security Agency, which means that the intelligence work will be done by the South African Security Agency.
Well, you know, as we sit here today, what we know from Witness X is that that task team did not follow due process. It didn't even register the cases. We also know it didn't go after one member of the tobacco industry. It only went after people like Mr. Dinath. And as we sit here today, we also know that not one member of SARS has been found guilty of any of these allegations. So I'm intrigued that you sit here today and you say it was all justifiable.
No. So again, I say, Advocate, that if you look at the memo that was sent to Chief Officer Enforcement by Witness X, you will see that Witness X does say that what I recommended, I did not recommend that things must not be registered on the SARS case
Correct.
system and all that. What I recommended was justifiable in respect of criminal investigations, which means the rest of the things that needs to follow needs to follow. As I sit here today, there has never been an instance where anyone had come to me and say, the memo you signed, the people had ended up doing wrong things with it, reported to me. No one did that. And to that extent, Advocate, when I have signed something that I think is lawful, and the people then go and do something to the contrary to what they were authorized or supported to be done, I will at least expect that people are able to say, listen, there is this thing that is happening and it's happening under your name. That did not come to me.
How long were you the chief officer, the acting chief officer of enforcement? When did that end?
It ended on the 30th of June.
2017.
Yes.
Because it's in that period that this task team went about its way with disregarding governance and bringing these sham cases against internal employees. And in fact, the one thing they didn't do was enforcement in the tobacco industry. Now, I'm saying that happened under your watch.
No, it didn't.
No, these events took place. It was signed into being on the 1st of September 2016. As the memo says, we've already started. Now, you were in charge of it until the middle of for a good 6 months after that. Did a lot in that time.
No, Advocate. On the 4th of April 2017, that Mr. Gobi Makanya was appointed slightly prior to that, but on the 4th, Ms. Mandisa Mbekeni in my office wrote a memo to Mr. Dinat and Mr. and Witness X to say, given that Mr. Makanya has now been appointed acting executive, we now please note that you are now going to be reporting to him, and the reporting lines was never to me. So I can't, sitting here, take responsibility for things that were being reported to the commissioner. The operations or cases that these people were reporting to the commissioner about or not reporting to the commissioner about, this team was under the control fully of the commissioner. I may have, for a very short period, have been responsible for that team, but the subsequent events, and those events included, that's the reason why those people were taken away from me, included the fact that I will be given an instruction, and that instruction I referred to, please appoint Mr. Gobi Makanya as an executive. And I said, no, we have to follow process. Please appoint Mr. Yegen Mundi as senior manager. I said, no, we need to follow process. And when I couldn't conclude those processes, that team was taken away from me and reported fully to the commissioner. So anything they've done through that, I can't answer for it, unfortunately. And the commissioner can answer for that.
When was it taken away from you? The period, date?
That team, in fact, and hence I'm referring to the memo of the 4th of April 2017. So that would have been the time that it totally moved, because that's the date that Mandisa then gave the team back to the office of the commissioner.
I just need further clarity. There was a time this team was fully within the office of the commissioner, had no reporting lines to you. There was some co-location with the team that Mr. Dinath was in.
Yeah.
And I understand at some point it moved from just the co-location, it moved into reporting to you. Am I correct about that? It moved into reporting within enforcement.
No, administratively only. It fully reported to the office of the commissioner, and I make that in my submission.
So functionally, it stayed with the commissioner.
It stayed with the commissioner.
Administratively, it was with you.
Yes.
Yes, more.
Yes. I just note that the memo says the work had already started.
Yes.
That
is from the side of the SAPS and the SSA.
I see. Just finally, before we move off this, I really don't understand SARS's change of heart about intelligence gathering. And to round that off, I must draw your attention to a press release, 15 June 2017. And yesterday, Mr. Lebello said that one of the wrongdoings of Mr. Pillay is that he entered into arrangement with the US Embassy in South Africa to get certain enforcement equipment from them, which they donated. Mr. Lebello said that was part of the evidence of the rogue activities that he was in charge of. Now, funny enough, that donation, the equipment that was donated, was only received by SARS in June 2017. And it includes vehicle GPS units, field binoculars, night vision goggles, handheld thermal imagers. And in June 2017, SARS proudly received that donation from the US Embassy, from the US government. And this is the very same donation that a year before, SARS had said Mr. Pillay had negotiated this, and that was rogue. Can you explain that contradiction to me?
No, I can't. I was not involved. I don't know what you're talking about, so I can't.
Who do you think can explain? Because
The commissioner can.
The commissioner.
Yes.
Are you finished this part?
This part, yes.
Because I would like to have
To
a bit of a
break.
break, and I think for you. Yes, no, please.
Ms. Steinberg, I just need clarity on something. With the alleged threat that had been made against your family, and which resulted in you, in the commissioner asking you to please sign the memo, which you then signed. Does that mean that that unit was formed as per the insistence or the instruction of the tobacco industry to SARS?
I would be lying if I said it was the tobacco industry, because I was never given the names. Whether it was the tobacco industry or any other, I don't know. All I know is that the commissioner came to me looking quite concerned to say, listen, just sign this. So the commissioner can be the only person that can answer that. I really can't answer that.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll break. I don't carry a watch.
It's now 1:05.
What time do you? 2 o'clock.
Uh,
See Mr. Labello at 2 o'clock. I'd invite
Yes,
him
but
back.
I have more, and I think Mr.
No, I
Mathebula
understand.
also wants to say more.
No, I
Yeah.
understand that, but I just think perhaps we better, just as a courtesy to Mr. Labello, just see him at 2 o'clock for a short while, just to see where we are there and where we're going to, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
Is that okay? And then we'll continue.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Judge.
you very much.